Hey folks, this is Doc, back in this, docking it up, Doc style. Today we're going to take a look at a text called Code Breaking and Computers in Bletchley Park. We're going to focus on standard RI 8.6, which is determining an author's point of view or purpose in a text and analyzing how the author acknowledges and responds to conflicting evidence or viewpoints. This is going to correlate with question 22. So we're not going to have time to read the entire text. What we are going to do is just read a portion of it so that we can answer the question. So let's begin. Code Breaking in Computers in Bletchley Park by Thomas Bender. If you don't know the history of Bletchley Park, it would be easy to walk by this sprawling yet unassuming mansion in England without giving it a second look. Today, it is the location of both the National Code Center and the National Museum of Computing. However, during the Second World War, it was a top-secret location where undercover code breakers reported for duty.
All right, lads, let's do some math.
The code breakers quietly but determinedly helped the Allies, the countries that joined together against German forces to win the war. The work done at Bletchley Park was significant both because it allowed the Allies to gather information from behind enemy lines and because it was where the first computer was developed. So if I'm just looking at this and I'm reading the first paragraph, it's obvious to me that we're talking about a real place, Bletchley Park. We're talking about work that was done there with code breaking during World War II. So just real quick, I know that I'm going to put down that my genre is nonfiction. So I know my genre-based thinking jobs are going to be, I need to know the topic, I need a gist for each paragraph that relates to the topic or explains how the paragraph relates to the topic, and I need a central idea. We're not going to go ahead and get the whole central idea today because we're not reading the entire text, but we are going to try to put down our topic and figure out how each paragraph that we are reading relates to the topic. And just by reading this first paragraph, I can tell that we're talking about a place called Bletchley Park where people were breaking codes. It's where the National Code Center was at, where code breakers were working to figure out German codes during World War II. So I know that my topic is just going to be code breakers during World War II who were working at Bletchley Park. Okay, so now that I know what my topic is, I can figure out how each paragraph relates to the topic. So we're going to go ahead and skip over some sections where they were talking about some real, at first the Germans, they had some really simple codes, and the Americans were were able just to get some mathematicians to figure out how to break those codes. But eventually the codes got to be so complicated that they had to figure out how to invent what they call the first computer. So we're going to skip to this section, keeping up, deciphering ladder codes and the first computer. After the team at Bletchley Park figured out the Enigma code, the Germans moved on to an even more sophisticated method of encryption that they had honed and perfected. The British called this new code FISH. By 1944, cracking the code by hand was no longer possible. It became necessary to invent a machine that could process more digital information in a much shorter time than a human codebreaker was capable of possessing. So this gist here is just going to be Allies need to invent a machine to break codes. Codes now very complicated or very complex. The ultimate solution to finding out fish, and if you guys remember, fish is what the British are calling this new code that's so complicated that they need a machine to break it. So maybe we want to go back and highlight what fish is. and also highlight and here this paragraph, the need for them to invent a machine. All right, so now we all know fish is the name of this code that they're trying to break, and it's so complicated they need a machine to do so. Let's go back to this paragraph. The ultimate solution to figuring out fish was a machine called Colossus. The word Colossus refers to this massive statue of this Greek sun god that was put up in the city of Rhodes. It is often described as the ancestor of the modern computer. So this is going to kind of be maybe like the first computer. It's often described as the ancestor of the modern computer, but comparing it to an internet wired laptop is a little like equating a house cat to a tiger. They are related, but the differences are at least as numerous as the similarities. So here the author says that, yeah, this is going to be a new computer, but it's going to be like comparing a house cat to a tiger. And as you know, a house cat is a super docile, passive little creature compared to the might of a tiger. So we get this simile that lets us understand that this new computer, yeah, it's going to kind of be like the first computer, but it's nothing compared to what computers are like today. And the simile of comparing the differences between this first computer and what computers are like today and a house cat to a tiger, that simile, that figurative language helps us understand that this computer, yeah, it was a computer, but it wasn't as complicated as the stuff is today. So the main point of this paragraph is we just learn that Colossus is the name of this first computer, and it's nothing as complicated as computers are today. Colossus, which is the name of this first computer, Colossus was absolutely massive, and it operated thanks to well over 1,000 vacuum tubes. Still, its capabilities were impressive, at least for the time. Using it, the Bletchley Park team could complete mathematical calculations that would have taken weeks to do so by hand in a matter of hours. This allowed them to do the extensive work necessary to crack the mind-boggling German code. Colossus also laid the groundwork for the development of the faster, smaller, and more user-friendly computers people use today. So the main gist of this paragraph and how it relates to the topic of code breakers during World War II in Bletchley Park is just that we see that Colossus got the job done, and it became like the prototype or the kind of first model that laid the groundwork for how computers were going to work today. And this thing's pretty interesting. It's 1,000 vacuum tubes. I mean, can you imagine? We have these little computers that are all packed into our iPhones and our Androids, can do all kinds of stuff. This computer that was just able to solve mathematical calculations, it took 1,000 tubes in order to operate it. So I can imagine this thing was pretty huge. So let's take a look at question 22. This question has two parts. First, answer part A, then answer part B. Part A, how does the author acknowledge the viewpoint of people who might not agree that Colossus was the first computer? Okay, so before I even look at the options, I want to go back and answer this myself. So let's be specific as to what we're trying to answer. So how does the author acknowledge the viewpoint? So we're trying to figure out how the author recognizes the viewpoint of people who might not agree that Colossus was the first computer. So what's the author do? I think I have a sense of where to go because we kind of paused on it before. It's kind of right here where the simile is, right? He says, in the solution to figuring out the code called fish was a machine called Colossus. It's often described as the ancestor of the modern computer. And here's where he kind of qualifies his thought or kind of pauses for a moment to
Give concession to any critic who might come at him for saying he's overstepping by making the claim that Colossus is the first computer.
So I'm answering this myself. That's where he stops and he recognizes the viewpoint of people who might not agree that Colossus was the first computer. He sort of acknowledges that it's not the same, but it's something like the model that they then used to develop the first computer. So A, he admits that Colossus was extremely different from modern computers. That seems like that's true. He admits it was different. It's like comparing a cat to a tiger. So I would put a question mark next to that. It's different. He admits it's different. He agrees that Colossus was more like a calculator than a laptop. I go back and look at the paragraph we just read. I'm seeing nothing about the word calculator. Although, maybe because it just does mathematics, but it's doing some complicated mathematics, so it's not quite like a calculator. So I'm going to put a question mark next to that. Now I look at C. C says he points out that Colossus wasn't able to process digital information very efficiently. And in the paragraph we just read, there's nothing about efficiency that's mentioned, so I'm thinking that's not it. D says he recognizes that today's computers would exist even if Colossus had never been built. No, he says Colossus becomes the kind of prototype of the modern computer. The author, and that has nothing to do with him recognizing anybody else's opposing view. So, based upon what we just read, the answer that makes the most sense is A. He admits that Colossus was extremely different from modern computers. So this is the real moment when he's the real answer where we see him recognizing the viewpoint of somebody who might not agree that Colossus was the first computer. So B says, which sentence from the passage best supports the answer to part A? So we're looking for evidence to support this, so we need to make sure that the answer in B matches what we chose for part A. So which sentence from the passage best supports the answer to part A? A, it became necessary to invent a machine that could process more digital information in a much shorter time than a human code breaker was capable of processing. So this is just about the need to have a computer that's going to be able to do what a human can't do. This is nothing about the author stopping to recognize the viewpoint of somebody who might be like, you're going to call Colossus a computer? I don't think so. So it can't be A. B says the ultimate solution to figuring out fish was a machine called Colossus. Again, this is nothing about the author recognizing that somebody, might disagree with him comparing Colossus to a modern computer. This is just about the need for the computer, the need for Colossus, because the code fish was so complicated that basic mathematicians, or really smart mathematicians rather, couldn't break the code. So it can't be B. C says it's often described as the ancestor of the modern computer, but comparing it to an internet-wired laptop is like equating a house cat to a tiger. So this is the section we went back to where we see our simile, and this is where he recognizes anybody's opposing viewpoint to him saying that Colossus is a computer. He's like, yeah, it's a computer, but wait, before you start having your opposing viewpoints and saying this is nothing like a modern computer, let me just say, to compare Colossus to a modern computer is like comparing a house cat to a tiger. Right now, I'm thinking C is going to be our best answer so far, so we can put a definite question mark next to that. D says Colossus also laid the groundwork for the development of the faster, smaller, and more user-friendly computers people use today. So this is, an important quote because it's showing that Colossus was the prototype, but this is not the moment where he stops and recognizes anybody's viewpoint that might say, Colossus is not the same as a modern computer. C is going to be our best answer because this is where he's like, okay, people, before you get mad at me and you say that what my comparison between Colossus and a modern computer is ridiculous, let me just give you some credit and agree with you people who would critique me and say, okay, wait, this is, the prototype for the modern computer, but it's nothing like the modern computer. To compare the two would be like comparing a house cat to a tiger.